show. Hi, everybody. Recruiting Animal here. I don't say what's up like the younger guys, okay? What's up, everybody? Okay, I don't talk like that. I say hi. It's February 15th, 2023. We've got the great Richie Rich Rosen, cornerstonesearch.com. Raise your hand.
There you go.
Gavin Johnston. Everything about recruitment.com. Now that he comes here, and we're going to do an ad for him later in the show. And Jimmy Durbin. He hasn't been on for years, but here he is. Jim, do you have a URL, a domain name now?
No, I'm a corporate sellout, so there's no need to do leads anymore.
Okay, I don't know what that means. You had a company that you sold to somebody. You don't need to give us your domain name. Okay, that's what you're telling me. Okay.
I don't really have anything anymore.
Do you know Gavin and Rich?
I know Rich, of course.
There you go.
Okay.
What's happening?
Gavin's
Becoming a fan of Gavin, I'm hoping.
and he's a good guy too. Jimmy was like a partner with us on recruiting.com, a blog from almost 20 years ago.
Oh boy.
Not quite. Okay, he's been on the show. Okay, so let's get to it. Here's a bland one, but I couldn't believe this. An article says studies show that candidates like to get bad news via email. Okay. I thought it was the opposite. They find that offensive, that it's too hands-off, impersonal. Anybody got a take on that?
I think weak candidates don't want to get it on the phone. Good candidates want to get feedback and discuss and figure out what happened.
No, this is after an interview, okay?
I understand. But after, that's when you're going to get feedback after an interview. So, but good candidates want to know, like, what happened. You know, bad candidates are like, who the hell cares? Or, oh, how could they hate me so much?
I figure if they're going to an interview, they're not a bad candidate. Isn't that right, Rich Rosen? You're not sending in bad candidates.
Unfortunately, there's bad clients who think good candidates are bad candidates. Poor interviewing skills.
Okay, you're screwing that up, Gavin.
No, wait, it's like my favorite. It's like you get
only good people were finding jobs. It's impossible. You're going to have mediocre people all over the place.
But then you get the bad hiring managers who are like, well, what's your biggest weakness? And these guys tell them a weakness, and they're like, oh, well, we can't hire you. You got a weakness. You know, I mean, it literally just happened to me the other day. You know,
let's go into. I'm going to shift entirely.
Jimmy Durbin.
I want to hear that weakness story. Okay, tell us that story right now, and I'll be quiet so I can create a clip. Now I'm into clips. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, no, the company, they asked a candidate basically, what would your peers think is your weakness, you know, or what would your, I guess something along those lines. And the candidate answered about, you know, that he's too professional was kind of the answer. And
I work too hard and I care too much.
Pretty much. And that was the reason they knocked the guy out.
No.
At the not even the 11th hour. We're talking like 12 hours and like 2 minutes. Like, I'm like, really? Like, yeah, he's not a team player.
Yeah.
How did they get that? Not a team player from too professional.
Because he said he's too professional. He doesn't like, you know, hang with the guys. That's how they took it. And no discussion.
No, that something's wrong there. Does anybody agree with me? That's insane.
There's a lot wrong there.
We all agree it's insane.
Everybody agrees with you on that one, Animal.
Okay,
First time in history.
Jimmy, first, what's insane about it? What could Rich have done? Rich made a mistake, in my opinion. That guy should have been hired, unless there was something else he's not telling us.
I have 3 of the 4 finalists. It's a mess.
It's they're going to hiring managers are squirrely sometimes, and they come up with this is my favorite question, which they shouldn't be allowed to have because they're not good enough to have a favorite question. They've never tested it. That question's built. It's basically behavioral questioning on steroids. Tell me about a time when you failed and how you achieved. The whole point is trying to guess your emotional stability. Are you self-aware? The problem is it's a guess. You don't know. Are you supposed to tell them the worst thing that happened?
Exactly.
Are you supposed to pick something in the middle? If you do something too inconsequential, they'll punish it for you. Those are hiring managers who don't know how to interview.
But this guy gave a bland, meaningless. What?
They promise they think they know how to interview, so they ask these intelligent-sounding questions they read on a book, but they don't really understand the answer. And they don't have to dig into the answer, so they make these stupid assumptions. And their award is God, and that's it.
Hey, the candidate should know the answer to impress me. It's a dance for me monkey question.
Let's go. Gavin wants to say something.
Well, no, I was going to say, as Jim says, one, a lot of these hiring managers are not trained on how to recruit. But two, there's too much SIA. Cover your backside. And so they think, oh, there's a little bit something there that might be a little risk.
Yep,
Run
you're
away.
right. You're right. You're 100% right. The managers right now are spineless. They have no teeth. They get told what to do. They're afraid to make them look bad in front of their boss. Afraid to take any chances. I just had this conversation with the GM last week. I was like, your managers are all afraid of you, and they're all making horrible decisions. I told them you're literally hiring all the wrong people.
Okay, hold on a second.
Do you guys remember hazing? Do you guys know what hazing is in colleges?
This guy gave a bland, meaningless answer. I'm too professional. I don't even know what it means. It sounds like he's patting himself on the back. I'm really, I work too hard, just like Jimmy just said. Yeah. What was wrong? Why didn't you press him back, Rich?
Well, that's part of the problem. This is why I like smaller companies. Bigger companies, they're in sales kickoff, so I couldn't have a deep conversation with the guy. So it's going through their talent act. But I've just seen this company do this enough where it's like they're looking for everything wrong. Like you literally have to be an 11 out of 10 in their mind.
Yeah, but you said walk away from that kind of client. Why are you sending people out there?
And I am walking away from that kind of client, but I had a bunch of deals in pipeline with them. The candidates are all just finishing up. I'm done with it because
so you couldn't tell from the start that they were no good, that they were hard to work with.
I did, but I had 20 candidates floating around there within a matter of days, all getting to finals. And so, now they're all dying out.
Am I the only one here who thinks that something went wrong? He didn't see from the start in the intake sessions that these were stupid idiots. These
listen,
were unreasonable.
Animal, let me explain this to you.
Dude, nobody.
Hang on. There's multiple hiring managers all over the country for this one company. Each manager turned out to be nuttier than the next, but the core TA team was actually fantastic. And the GM is great. But he didn't see what was going on with his own team. I didn't realize that, listen, this company literally only hires people that they know. You could be Tom Brady and you wouldn't be good enough for football because you had a losing season to them if they didn't know you. That's
lose to the Cowboys.
Yeah. Okay. You're sending in rock star candidates and they keep saying no to them when there's no reason they're saying no. What are you going to do? You're this close to making, $40,000 a pop.
Okay, but I thought that Rich Rosen would be able to tell from the start there's kryptonite here.
I'm not a magician.
You can't talk to every person.
Adam, I've never made a mistake in my life. It's amazing. I think this may be the first one.
Okay, I think Michael G. Cox, the salesrecruiter.com wanted to say something. Did he?
No, I was just chiming in. There's no way that Rich could have known that this was going to happen. It's impossible. No. And not only that, maybe if Rich even knew the question was going to come up and maybe gave the candidate a heads up and the candidate gave a decent answer, and it kind of sounds like he did, it's one of those throwaway questions.
Yeah.
You still can't anticipate the client reacting like this.
Yeah, you wouldn't go from number 1 on the list to number 4.
To out.
Yeah. Literally no rhyme or reason why people are getting knocked.
Okay.
Let's teach Rich how to fix this.
Rich is just a comment for me, and we'll go around again. Everybody's going to get a chance on this one, okay? I think Rich is 1,000 times smarter than me when it comes to recruiting. I can't believe that this was not visible from the start, okay?
It's not about smarter. I'm not going to say Rich is smarter than you.
Well, you haven't complimented my intelligence before. Okay.
Rich doesn't have 80 hours to talk to everybody at that company, sit on the wall and make sure they do it correct. That's part of it, is there's an assumption that you're a good company working. But what happens, this is a historical problem. They started getting their interviews tougher because they were so good, we're elite, we don't hire the best. So people get in, it's a very hard interview process. And just like hazing in fraternities, every interview has to be harder and harder. After a year, 2, 3, 5, nobody can get in because they want you to run that gauntlet. So that's when you go back and you say, let me ask you a question. Could you pass the interview today? And all of a sudden the hiring manager's like, oh no, I could never get hired today. You're like,
but you want to hear something funny? So one of the managers was comparing these job hoppers who stayed 3 years at startups, 6 years at startups, job hoppers, compared to his 10 years at IBM. All right. Which IBM is like the biggest company on the planet in tech, basically at the time. But he moved from company to company internally, so that was different. And to him, that was stable. And this guy who moved every 3 years, mind you, had massive success, was high risk.
Okay, I want to say hello to David M Marr, Elly Cohen, and I'm going to Gavin. Gavin, Gavin's a trainer, okay? Everything about recruitment.com. What did Rich do wrong? Sorry, Rich. What did Rich do wrong? How would you train him on this if he came to you?
Train him on how to go.
I'm putting you on the spot, okay?
I don't think you're listening to what Rich said. Rich said he's got a relationship, and then he gets requirements for multiple hiring managers. That relationship gets him in. If he had to go back and say, by the way, I'm going to evaluate every single one of your hiring managers before accepting that specific role, you wouldn't do that. You don't have the time. It makes no sense. It's like saying, oh, I've met your sister. That means I've met you, therefore your sister's pretty. You do not know what's going to happen, you know? There's nothing you could have done.
Define met your sister.
It, you know?
Yeah. show us a picture of the sister. I'll tell you the one thing I did do wrong. That in my hindsight, I love the talent acquisition people are great. All right, they really are. They're dynamite. Awesome. But the problem was they're too nice, is what I found. And at first, I realized they weren't giving me enough negative information. They're just telling me everything is great. After the first one, I kind of realized this, and I started honing in on it more and bugging the hiring managers a lot more than I normally would, but it was end of quarter, a whole long story behind it. But I've told them now, I mean, you got to give me everything. Like, there's people that are in the process still, they got to give me everything. And if I am going to work on anything in the future, I have to work directly with the hiring manager like I normally do.
Hold on, you were getting negative feedback about your candidates and they weren't passing it on to you.
I was not getting the full negative feedback. I was getting the colorized version of it. And at first I didn't realize it because they're really nice and they're really good and they're telling you everything you want to hear. So you're like, oh my God, these guys are great.
But aren't you a guy who insists on dealing with the hiring managers directly, not through some intermediary?
I do, but not they were going through year end, quarter end. So if you're in sales, the last thing you want to do is just hammer the VP of sales and the RVPs while they're going through year end, closing their books, getting their final deals done. That's where they're making their big money. So normally I'm right there, but with this TA, it's a bigger company. So you got to play the game a little bit to get in.
We've got a lot of people here who have worked internally. It's not always possible to get in touch with the hiring manager if you're going through the talent acquisition team. Is that right or wrong? Can you always get through to the direct hiring manager? Who wants to address that?
You should always be. I mean, everyone's got texts. If you're taking a dump, you can text me. It's pretty simple. I mean, there's really no reason you can't get in touch with the manager.
I'm going to quote you on that,
okay? Please do. I've used it before. Feel free. So
okay, you ask, can you always? And the fact is that no, you can't always get in.
No, that's
to
not
the
true.
Direct hiring
you
manager.
Always can. They choose not to get back to you. They don't value the same level of priority as you do. And that's
correct. And there are some organizations that insist that you work only with the TA team,
and those are the ones that don't work. Those are
exactly. I've never made a placement at an organization where I was just starting off, and I have a conversation with only TA, and they won't let me speak to anybody else, and never made a placement. Wasted a ton of time.
Yeah. Like this team is the best TA team I've worked with in a long, long, long time. And they're okay with me talking to the managers. Yeah, seriously. They're okay with me talking to the managers. But the managers for years have been told not to talk to the recruiters. So the managers are waiting for TAs and HR to say it's okay. And they've done it, but it's been a colossal of errors with sales kickoff, year end, quarter end.
If they won't let you speak to the managers, that tells me that they're an immature talent acquisition team.
Welcome to most of
a lot more internal issues at stake. And if I was an agency, I would avoid those places like the plague because it's a waste of your time.
100%.
Also places that have large, massive vendor management systems that you have to click through, jump through. Unless you're placing contractors, it's different, but you're doing search. So from the search side, waste of time.
If you're playing contractors, you do not go through VMS setups.
In the US, a lot of them are managed.
You want to expand on that, Gavin? You're so passionate about it.
Oh, absolutely. I've been forced down one of those through a large Canadian company, actually. Never again. I was a supplier to put in place a VMS. and I refused to do it. And the last day, I finally signed up because I had people out with them. And it's an absolute nightmare. It's an administrative nightmare. And then suddenly you're just shackled and you can't do anything afterwards anymore.
Yep. You double your effort. It takes double the amount of time to get anything done with those stupid things.
Okay. Well, it depends on, there are some that are ran really well. When I worked in agency and we placed contractors, if you have a good relationship with the person that runs the VMS at the client, that's part of the key. Usually they'll have tiers of vendors, and you'll start off usually on like tier 2 or 3, depending upon how you market it. If you come in as a niche vendor, you might be able to get higher up, but basically they usually have a rule where the hiring managers, the best ones I've seen, how they would run it is they would have hiring managers on the call, telling them what they were looking for, had the vendors had a chance to answer questions or ask questions, and then they knew what the interview process was, and they were able to get the candidates in. But again, that's contract temp placement, not search. But vendor management systems, generally speaking, are about cost containment and lowering cost, and not about.
Yeah, they want you to knock down your fee. But quickie Gavin, go ahead.
I just want to say, if there's a VMS in place, it basically means that the purchasing department has taken over the organization, and you have got a massive problem on all levels, because purchasing people, first of all, they weren't born on this planet, but secondly, they are squeezed throughout their whole year to reach their targets. And who are they squeezing? Us, trying to get in there. And so you're just fighting a losing battle. You might as well turn them into a supply chain and nick people out of there and go and place them in normal organizations.
Last time I saw Jim, he was working. You were running a large sourcing operation in a big corporation.
Not in a VMS, though. So not in a VMS. That's totally separate.
No. My point is, you've been internal. My impression was that it was harder and harder to get in touch with the hiring manager, and you guys are saying, stay away from anybody who won't let you talk directly to the hiring manager. That seems to me it's going to reduce your range. Jim, do you agree? Quick. Do you agree with what they're saying?
It's because the real pitch is that finance is controlling things because they don't want to write too many invoices, and because of that, they don't care about quality and others. It's purely for them a way to hit, as you said, their bonuses. This is like the rebates in VMSs. The first year they squeeze us, but then we change our rates. Then it's just taken away from the hiring budget. So it really is an internal war between purchasing and the quality for the hiring managers. And it's nothing to do with quality or anything else. It is just the CFO's like, you guys screwed up. We're going to put something in place. And they're hitting our finance targets. We don't care about the rest.
The advice we would give to corporate recruiters like Elly, who've been laid off and are now going into their own operations. I'm making a pretend that she's going to be a solo recruiter. She wouldn't commit last week. Okay. So the new solo recruiters do not work with a company that will not give you direct access to the hiring manager. Is that what I'm hearing as a general rule right across the board?
100%.
Yes.
Only for the last 40 years, though.
Yeah.
Okay, Rich, I'm sorry we had to be so hard on you, but that was a very
I'll get over it.
That was a very interesting actual case. So now here's the other question is, I don't ask that question. What's your biggest weakness? Because you're either asking the person to lie or to hurt themselves, which they shouldn't do.
Right, you're supposed to give it. You're supposed to be able to turn it around to a positive kind of thing, but it's just stupid.
That's what I've heard. It's like the people who apologize for all the inconsistencies.
Yeah. The guy that overprepared for the interview.
It's really a way to gauge their ability to politically turn a question and not answer it. Because it's not doing anything else.
That would be, and Mike, you're totally right. If the hiring managers actually knew how to interpret the answer,
Yes. I think from the hiring manager side or the interviewer side, it's just a filler question. Like, I don't know what else to ask.
It's like, what are you going to be in 5 years?
And this question has been around for 30 years. So
I love him. Wait, can I just say, I love when Michael G Cox talks. I feel like I'm talking to a therapist. He's very calm.
Right?
Soothing voice.
How does that make you feel, Rich?
Yeah.
I'm going to sit on my couch,
It's in their mind. I can almost see the process going with, so should I go with the your biggest weakness, or
Or should I get a
ping-pongs in
meatball sub for
jumbo
lunch?
jet?
You know, yeah, yeah.
Ping pongs in a jumbo jet.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, do I watch the movie or do I get a lunch? I don't know. I mean, they just guess anyway. That's why I tell these clients all the time. You can interview the person 100 times. There's zero difference in the risk you're eliminating if you interview them once, twice, or 50 times. You know.
Yeah.
Really, I've read people
you
say
gotta be
that you
careful
have
because
to
they
have
might choose
3
the 50
interviews in
times
order to
option.
get a good sense of the person. You don't
I mean,
agree?
you have the
Jim
hiring
doesn't agree.
manager, you have the peer, the people you're going to work around. But I mean, there's always some other yutz that's going to come into the company 2 weeks later that's going to screw things up, change things around. I mean, especially for sales guys, you give them shitty accounts. Doesn't matter how good you are. I mean, if the counts, I mean, like how many guys? There's so many guys that are getting fired right now because they had a great year, they got new accounts, suddenly their pipeline stinks, so they fire them. I mean, it's just, but and then there's other people that you interview, like all the stupid assessment tests that everyone loved to give for a little while. Did it really change the ratio of people that were lasting at the companies? Did it increase the retention or the?
They did, but not as a correlation. Remember when assessments came in? This is why history helps for so much. We were there when they first started using these.
Mm-hmm.
It was because we had so many candidates, and HR needed an easy and quick way. So everybody's got to have a degree. Let's throw some assessments. When you dig into it, you realize, assessments work, but they have to be applied throughout the hiring and then the management process.
Yep.
At the front, you're just getting false signals. But it was a way to cut down on the number of people you had to talk to. And now they're invested in it. So
exactly. Yeah. I mean, for salespeople, we were at a conference, a Pinnacle conference, and we had a speaker from one of these guys, one of these test companies come. And I asked the guy afterwards, I'm like, what do you think for sales guys? And he's like, they're useless. For salespeople. Yeah. He literally, I mean, hand to God. He's like, because sales guys, I mean, the sales guys are different. We're all weird, man. We're all screwed up. We're all misfits.
I find it hard.
Like
I have a question before I forget. I don't have Alzheimer's yet, but I forget stuff. Okay, should recruiters then send these hiring managers a list of 5, just so it's manageable? Here's 5 questions I don't think you should use. Okay.
That would go over well.
One of them is, what's your greatest weakness, and the other is, what does your mother think of you? Something.
Yeah.
Should
you don't understand? We're dumb recruiters. We don't know anything.
No, should we send out these guys? Obviously, no. You guys have been saying, well, Michael G Cox just said, the therapist here said, well, these guys don't know what they're doing.
Questions we can't.
We don't know. We don't know what they don't know what they're doing, so they fall back on these things they've heard are standard questions, which are useless. Should we? I've never done it. I've never sat in on an interview myself. Should we make sure at least stay away from this, these stupid things? Jim's nodding and shaking his head.
The problem here, it gets worse. So you know what happens when they stop asking those questions? They start asking worse ones like, okay, Rich, we have 2 minutes left in the interview. Why don't you give me something to remember you by?
Oh, God.
Sing me a song.
The goal is to remember me. Okay, well, your mother gives terrible. You want to make sure you remember me. That's the name of the game, right? Yeah. It gets worse if you don't.
Yeah. And you don't want to get them off script. You're right. I agree. If they go off their planned questions, forget it.
I think there are too many. I think there are too many questions to avoid. Like whose attention are you going to hold long enough to walk them through each question that they should not be asking? Because
I just said a list of 5. A list of 5. That's what I said. Make it 3 if you want.
There's a list of 50 that you could easily tell them stop. But then you also have to explain for each one why not ask that one. Nobody's going to give you enough time to walk.
Okay,
and we don't know the answer.
Animal, hold on.
Where are you?
Mario here. I am from my gaming rig. I'm calling from a gaming rig.
Mario?
Animal, I always love every week. If someone's not on video, they're just in the ethosphere.
He's a regular. I featured him on LinkedIn today. Okay, from heaven. It's Mario. He's up in heaven today. Go ahead. Tell us.
I'm in front of my gaming rig. Obviously, I'm in heaven. Okay. So I have a question. Why won't recruiters, the main recruiters, sit in on the hiring managers when they're interviewing people?
They get
Would
mad
that be a
when
bad
the
idea?
candidate feels weird.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on Zoom you can do it's easier now. I mean, I did it a long time ago on a, I just called in on the, it was just some, an old, conference call, and you just sat and listened. It was actually super interesting. It was a very good hiring manager. It'd be great to do it today. It's and just see how these people are doing. And we have them, like I told this one company, I'm like, you guys are doing this role play and knocking people out for like the silliest things. I'm like, do you even record them? They're all on Zoom. They're like, that's a great idea. I'm like, wow.
What is that red button?
Yeah, what's that big record button do?
Boy, careful when you record.
There's a privacy issue there. There's a privacy issue there.
It's not a privacy issue. You're recording this.
Yeah,
but you're volunteers. You're not coming for a
he's going to volunteer too. He wants to do a job.
Animal, you're off the privacy chart here. No, you're allowed.
It's an easy out for the candidate if he doesn't want to record it. Right.
Okay, but hold on. Rich Rosen told us a few weeks ago, look, you're the expert. The recruiter's the expert. You have to consult with these people. And that means advising them about interviews, how to do a good interview. Now everybody here is saying, no, don't even send them 3 or 5 questions that they should never ask. Okay,
you have to know. You got to know your client. You can't. Again, you make everything black or white, like all or nothing. There's certain clients that are actually coachable. Not many, but there's certain clients who actually want advice. They want to help. They want to improve how they're doing things. But if you did that for every client,
those are not the guys you have to worry about. It's the ones who don't ask.
Rich,
look. Anybody else?
Rich, I think the animal will go and poke the bear for no reason, just to tick him off.
I mean, are you going to just once you know that they're bad interviewers?
You don't know.
Well, so then why are you going to piss them off at the beginning? You're in a business. You're in a service business. You're going to say, listen, I'm assuming you're going to suck at your interviews. So let me send you the questions you shouldn't ask. And then I'm going to send you the ones I want you to ask so I can prep my candidate on
So
these.
there's no, let me put it this way. There's no prophylactic processes.
No, here's the thing.
Dr. Cox is here again. There you go.
At least in sales recruiting, there are just too many variables that you cannot control for.
Exactly.
And it's just impossible.
I'm confused.
It would be
Here's
nice.
a bigger question. What if there is no point to the interview except to make the hiring manager feel like they're invested in the candidate, and thus they continue to work with them for 6 months to a year because they made the choice?
Mm-hmm.
That could be the point of interviews, is to force the company to feel like they made a decision and don't want to be wrong. And all the rest of it is nonsense.
Yeah. It's a good view. I like it.
Except for then there's no point in interviews.
There's no point of interviews anyway.
Well, dude, even with great interviews.
How many people hire their friends? Like, I mean, how many times do you work on a search like, oh, you know what? I brought my buddy in. I mean, they don't work out, but it happens all the time.
Gavin, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Question of should we send 5 questions, 5 questions not to ask, is actually the wrong question. The question for recruiters should be, do you actually go and try and find out about hiring managers' supposed or non-existing interviewing experience? And that's something that I regularly do. Is I go in and I get a new relationship with a hiring manager, and I will go and ask, how do you actually do typically your interviews? I try and find out if they've got experience or not, what kind of questions they ask. That I will definitely do. And if I feel that it will not have a very serious negative impact on my commercial relationship with them, then I might steer them in the right direction. But the first thing is, you've got a commercial relationship. You've got to be careful of the ego of that person, and then you move on.
Okay.
And I think that's all part of your discovery process. It's just not every company is going to give you, a lot of companies don't want to give you any information on other than the interview steps. They purposely, obviously, don't want to tell you what questions they're going to ask because then they think you're going to prep them for that.
Great secret.
Like that's the worst thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's horrible. That's horrible. Making you look good and them, I mean, when you're reaching out to these clients, though, I mean, because part of the way I frame it is how we're going to make you as a hiring manager look good. And, that's one of the ways to actually do it is, we can prep these guys, not so they, con the interview, but so we actually know what they want to see instead of having to guess. I mean, it's amazing how well you could do in life when people actually want to help you. And that's what, salespeople do, quite frankly. So, but that's a good part of it.
I want to introduce Ernie, foodindustryrecruiter.com. And I want to do an ad for Gavin. Gavin is a recruiting trainer. You can go to his website, everythingaboutrecruitment.com. You can see he's a nice guy who's easy to talk to. I have to say, he's got his own unique approach to recruiting. It is ultra niche. Okay. He wants you to know everything about your very narrow niche, all the people, all the buyers, all the information about the industry. So check him out. Everythingaboutrecruitment.com. Was that a good ad, Gavin, or do you want me to say something else? Did I ruin it for you?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Okay, does anybody have something else? We've talked about these foolish hiring managers, and I felt depressed because you guys are essentially saying, you know, they're pretty bad, but there's nothing we can do about it. Although Gavin gave us a little hope there towards the end. That was my takeaway. Anybody got a question? I got tons more. We can go back to the first question I asked. I'll go back to the first question. I saw a survey that said that candidates who strike out, they prefer to get, you know, after they've had an interview, they prefer to get the information via an email rather than a phone call. I was under the impression that they don't like impersonal turnoffs. Okay, does what's everybody's take?
It's the way the survey's written. Why in the world would you ask people about what they want in life? Are you kidding me? You've just made these people expert. They're not thinking about it. They don't spend day in and day out.
As opposed to
so what happens is it's a level too, right? Rich's people are going to be much different than a warehouse guy who's just showing up. So you don't ask people what they expect because they don't know. They don't know what works. You ask them what they feel like during and after the process. That's why those surveys are nonsense. I mean, everybody wants, I'd like a great salary and I'd like this. But then what do they actually do? They never do what these surveys claim they are because it's bad data. Never trust any survey in HR. We're all idiots when it comes to it.
I've always done phone calls.
We have to bust myths about that nonsense. So don't buy anything you ask people unless you can actually prove what they actually did. That's the answer to all those surveys.
Mm-hmm. Michael G. Cox phones people. You lost, buddy. Sorry, right?
He calls people after to see what their experience was. He doesn't call them beforehand and says, how would you like to be treated in the process?
We've covered the way I do this in the past, so it's a very.
No, yours is a blend. I'm not giving you any information. They went with somebody else. Thanks for working with me, but I didn't know.
I will give them information. Puts them on the couch. Talks to them.
no, Michael G. Cox. Oh,
Are you comfortable?
Yeah. Tell me about your mother.
Well, actually, okay. Does anybody else want to talk about the email issue? Turn off.
No, I called them because I figured if they took the time and they were courteous enough to talk to me, then I should be courteous enough to call them, and just let them know and leave them an email. But many times I get a compliment back saying, I wish more recruiters would do that.
Yeah.
So,
you're proving Jimmy Durbin right. You're going against the survey, and that's what they're thanking you for.
Yeah, well, like Jim said, F the survey. I just think it's the right thing to do, and that's what
Elly wants to talk. Yeah,
well,
you can butt in, Elly. You don't have to say hey, later that we're sexist. You have the same rule as everybody else. Talk over.
I actually never said that, but you do wind up shutting me down.
I do not shut you down. Go ahead and talk now.
I know. Shut up. Okay, go, Elly.
Don't tell me to shut up. Go ahead.
Stop talking.
Tens of millions of people are being rejected from jobs, and how many people were asked in the survey, and how were they asked? And so you're not getting the full context. Generally, people want to call, but you don't say, call me back. I mean, go ahead and leave the voicemail message with the invitation to get back with you if they want to discuss it.
Okay.
Yep. No, and nobody ever really does call you back. I think the feedback that I get is, hey, look, if it's bad news, I'm going to call you and let you know. If it's good news, I'm going to call you to get next steps set up and get you prepped up for that. And more often than not, they say, wow, that would be awesome, because most do not.
Well, and I would say there are people who would pick up the phone. It's just, if you miss them, leaving, rather than saying, call me back in that neutral and they don't know, just go ahead and leave the bad news.
Yes.
I always leave the bad news in the voicemail.
Yeah.
rather than risk playing phone tag or leaving you or sending you an impersonal email or doing what most others do, not calling you back at all, here's the bad news.
Now, the
Michael G.
touchy
Cox,
part
that's
in
pretty smooth.
closing things out, I find, is sometimes it's months later. And it's interesting you know, how people get angry when you get back with them too late from when they think, which should have been 6 to 8 weeks max. And you can try to keep in touch, but we all know things happen. So I do think it's interesting when people are like, it was 3 or 4 months ago, or worse yet, like when it gets to 6 months, you know, it's tricky closing it out.
Nobody
Then
here is out of touch with their candidates for 6 months. Okay, that's absurd. Maybe for the
I think that
internal.
might that might happen with the internal team, but
Maybe.
not with the agency recruiters.
Maybe I've
the
never
candidates
heard
are
of it.
our
It's
money.
outrageous.
Yeah, we ain't leaving our money on the table.
Yeah, and I am
Just
talking
they
more
die.
like when I'm contract and partnering internally more.
Let me address something, okay? Michael G. Cox is getting an awful lot of compliments today, and his video, Mario, you should check on LinkedIn, okay? You're the star of the video today. Michael G. Cox had a 30-second video on openers versus closers on LinkedIn this week, and that was the
hold up. You saying that I had a video? You posted that, not me.
Yeah, but it was you talking the whole 30 seconds, not me. Okay. And
go ahead.
And it was the biggest hit I had with five likes.
Okay.
And so I wanted to ask you to maybe you'd like to expand on that since it's such a popular topic. You said I'm not looking for closers. Closers is a stupid idea. I want openers. Do you want to talk about it again? You don't have to.
Well, so the big difference, too many people romanticize being a closer in sales. If you're doing your sales job properly, closing is cake. That's easy. The hard part is opening the conversation. And the weird thing is that cold calling, that prospecting, we give that in this, especially in like the software in the SaaS world, you give that to the least experienced individuals and tell them to do it 100 times a day and basically render it completely ineffective for the entire world. Cold calling doesn't work anymore because SDRs and BDRs do it 100 times a day times what, 100,000 of those people working across the United States. So the opening is a whole lot more difficult, opening a conversation.
Okay,
closing, if you're doing a sales job properly, closing is easy.
Closing
So
is
Michael,
easy. So
based on your feedback, I think we should have a separate tech stack. I mean, separate group of people just for openers. Correct? Instead of cold callers.
Those are his SDRs, his sales development representatives, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the SDRs and BDRs that are working to generate leads.
So what you're
and
saying, though,
whatnot.
let me
But the
bring
funny
that
thing
around
is,
to
though,
a
wait, hang on. The funny thing is the SDRs, which you're right, it's probably the hardest job or the lowest paid guy in the company. That's the funny thing.
Absolutely. And they get the smallest
That's sad.
piece of the pie.
Yeah.
On the commission side.
They're the guys
Like
who just learning.
It's like how sourcing used to be viewed and has been changing.
But these are the lead generation guys, right? So you're saying lead generation is the hardest thing and it's the most important thing. Am I right? Do I understand?
Not lead. I would say more appointment generation or demo generate. But lead is like, I don't want to confuse.
But you're getting marketing leads and you're getting sales leads.
Exactly. Marketing leads is something totally different.
You know? But the
marketing leads are like somebody's Gmail account to get the free download.
But the SDRs, though, the funny thing is like these guys, every executive, every enterprise rep wants one to work with, but there's not one that will tell you, or very minimal, that will ever tell you they're getting anything of value from these SDRs.
Yeah.
But yet every company races to have them.
Yes. Yeah, and the outside sales rep that is being supported by an inside sales SDR kind of person, they dog them, but they won't do the work themselves.
Yep. And then they call themselves the hunters, and they're not.
Yeah. Well, they're not the hunter, exactly.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. I want to hear what Jim has to say about this because I know Jim, but also put a question for after that. So what you guys are, what you said, Michael G. Cox, closing is a piece of cake if you're handling the sales process properly. So for recruiters, there shouldn't be any closing issue either. You're pre-closing all the way through, and then closing is not an issue. That's what I'm hearing from you. Jim, what about openers versus closers? Do you have a comment? You can just pass if you don't want to say anything.
He doesn't want to say.
I'm going to freak you guys out. I am a farmer, not a hunter. And that's okay. There's a difference between growing things and going out and opening them. And that's the challenge with sales, is they assume that there are salespeople that are just hunters, but it's a whole different dynamic because there's so much information you can gather. And it's just a lot easier to be a farmer, and farmers are more productive than hunter gatherers. Why do we start picking hunters? That's an ego-driven thing. And they tend to burn out. I honestly think it's a mistake to start splitting them up like that.
Well, the problem is the sales guys, like the companies, they look at, to your point, right or wrong, they look at the guy, they think the hunter is the guy opening those accounts. And since the SDRs really aren't opening them, good hunters, I mean, these are guys getting, $150,000, $175,000 base salaries, are the guys opening those doors, where the farmer, or the quote unquote farmer, is personally, I agree. I think he's still oftentimes opening accounts. It's opening a new division of GE or a new division of, Time Warner or something that has nothing to do with the other part that's actually using it. But that's the expansion part. That's the farmer part.
But at what point does these two divisions happen when you have a small company, a startup?
At the startups it's almost all hunters. I mean, eventually you'll get like one account manager or maybe a customer success guy who will then, expand those existing accounts. Like
let me ask you a question in regards to recruiters now. Sourcers, and some people just swear by just being a sourcer. Do they make a lot of money?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sourcers replaced recruiters internally. Got weird there because sourcers did what you guys do. Sourcers internally turned into headhunters because if I call someone really awesome, if I call not Michael G Cox because he's got enough compliments, but if I call David and I say, "Hey David, you're doing a great job," I just lost the thread on that.
But it was like Steve Levy. Was it Steve Levy and like Dan DaCosta? Those guys are sourcers, but they're really recruiters.
Yeah.
I never understood really
portions of what you guys did.
Yeah, I never really understood the difference, quite candidly. I mean,
I can tell you the difference. The first sources were just data collectors. Okay, they did a search, they came up with a list of names, and the recruiter, like Shally, when he was had a team at Microsoft, he had networkers and sourcers. So the sourcers got the names, they passed them over to the networkers who got on the phone. Okay, then the sourcers were the guys who also got on the phone. They did the pre-screen and they passed over the screened candidate to the recruiter. I agree with you. At that point, they're a headhunter. Yeah,
it might as well be it. Yeah.
I mean, I was a candidate. I dropped the process.
That's when they say that the recruiter was the closer, which Michael G Cox says is just a BS.
So in the podcast, when these guys talk about sourcing and just sourcing, and they're the real famous guys, right, in podcasting, those we all know, then are you all telling me that they're really recruiters?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, but the funny thing is, most sourcers don't think they're the recruiters for some reason. I don't know if they think they're
recruiting is like sales. Like, oh, I don't want to be a recruiter. I'm a talent acquisition sourcing specialist.
Yeah, which more often than not, honestly, from what I understand, generally makes them less money. So it's a stupid strategy, but that's what so many of them do.
We basically took all of recruiting, what you guys, the people on the outside headhunters did for years, begin to compartmentalize it, to break it down because we were paying internal people too much. We commoditized it. We don't train the new folks. But the problem is, so sourcing became like the fun part of recruiting. Out on the outside, you guys have to do all the work. Internally, we've split that up so we don't have to pay as much, and it's not as painful if you lose talent. So it's the automation of the recruiting process, which is
Jim. When you said you're paying too much, how much is too much?
Well, those are all off now. But when sourcers started, recruiters internally were making 150, 180 10, 15 years ago. They started bringing in sourcing so I could hire someone at 50. Well, then sourcers started getting up internally those kinds of positions. But then your quote recruiters were down making 50, 60 or in contract or easy to get rid of. So it was just a way to break down recruiting into, I don't want to train someone, we bring in someone new and pretend they were a recruiter. That's why you guys crushed them though. I mean, that's the whole point of the outside.
Because
Gavin.
In Europe, it's exactly the opposite. 99% of sources are considered as very much entry level and they're paid much less.
Yeah.
Then there's that 1% of the gods who can go and find that one exceptional candidate somewhere. But sourcing is not seen at all in the same way here.
Well, I think the thing is that sourcing now is viewed at multiple levels in the same way that recruiters are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with the names that we know, is that they can really find people, they can really engage people. And so it's not the old view of like, hey, we have an opening, do you want to have a conversation, which is what sourcing used to be. I mean, now it's, and again, a lot of these people who are very widely respected and who are giving trainings on sourcing, I mean, they're in the GovCon space, they're finding cleared software engineers. I mean, these are really hard niches. So I think that's the distinction. They're still sourcers.
I can totally agree with Elly, because I also work in the cleared space, right? And I have a specialized team that is split. I have my recruiting team and my sourcing team totally separate. Jim, what you said was 100% correct. So if I replace someone, I won't feel the pain of it.
So when does the sourcing end? Like I'm kind of confused. You source, do you
That will
call
vary
them?
from organization to organization.
Yeah, you call them and do the pre-screen
No,
on the phone.
One scene, Ernie,
Your
the
best
sourcing ends
sourcers
only
turn
when the
into
position is
headhunters
filled.
because your top executives are like, we're tired of losing great people. So if you're really great as a sourcer, you end up taking it all the way through. The people just filling the funnel don't really count, and those are the easy ones because they're replaced by tech pretty fast as well.
So when I even had a funny instance, because I technically am still with an RPO, but it ramped down quite some time ago. And we had a client where it's funny, when I interviewed, I was like, but I am not just a sourcer. And then I started and they're like, okay, we want you to source on, and I wasn't going to say they're putting me on a client. Like, no, I'm not just sourcing. But it was interesting, got complimented on how spot on the select people I send, that every person, the hiring managers wanted to see. And then what was interesting is I probably spent a little more time in my interviews. I mean, I was being told like 20 minutes, 30 at the most, and maybe I was spending a little more, but there was the relationship developed, and again, ascertaining well. And so what wound up happening is, with the person I was partnering with at the company, I wound up being kind of pulled in because here this recruiter was gonna, okay, I know, hold on. Here, you don't do that to other people.
I do. Okay.
Oh, he does.
He does.
This time
Okay.
I gave you a signal,
He's
so you wouldn't
merciless.
start crying. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, when this candidate was going to turn down the offer because something not great happened with the hiring manager, he wound up reaching to me. And so when I reached to the person internally and said, do you want to hear what's going on? She was like, yes. And so I wound up being pulled in further along. So I think that is interesting, kind of speaking to some points you all are making.
Yeah,
Like,
these
even when they want
lines
me to
are.
source, I wind
So
up
let-
doing full cycle.
May I ask?
Yeah.
I had to
another
ban
question?
the word recruiter from my organization. I've done it 3 times.
Hmm.
We're not going to call ourselves recruiters because the expectation of the hiring manager, the exec, is that recruiters do everything, know everything, our full life cycle. And we're not for a lot of those, and RPOs and sourcing. I had to ban it so that people wouldn't have the expectation, oh, why haven't you taken this all the way through? Why didn't you vet them? Because even the heads of the managers, we have blurred it, and now nobody knows what we do. If we can't answer it, how could a hiring manager know it?
So let me ask another question here. When I see all of these recruiters that call themselves recruiters get downsized, and you see a lot of them scrambling for jobs, why?
They're not recruiters. They need to get out of the industry.
Exactly.
We dumped 50% of people in 2001 before 9/11, and they all went into mortgage. And you're not supposed to say this online, but if you are applying to 20 jobs a day, get the hell out of my industry. You are not a recruiter. You're a monkey pushing something for a pellet.
Yep.
I'm full.
Hey,
There's a
Jim,
video.
hands
There's
off
a
to
video
you.
right
You're
there,
any
man. Do
good,
the
you go
video.
find a job like recruiters do, or don't
You
call
go, Jim.
yourself one. Call yourself
There
an
you
HR
go.
Exactly,
executive.
Jim. Go ahead. Awesome.
Ridiculous.
This is what I was saying last week. It's the same
Get
thing.
tougher.
Recruiters are lousy. That's what ruins the business.
Exactly. That this barrier to entry is so low for recruiting. Okay, we have so many morons here working. And I said this before everyone else said this.
Yeah.
Thank
Although
God you
I
can't
just
see
put
my
up my hand,
face.
said more, and I'm willing to put my hand. Okay. I just want to clarify something. Okay. There's no other show that gives everybody a chance. I give everybody a chance, but if I do that, I have to manage them. Okay. So if you want to come on the show, everybody's welcome, but don't start getting upset if I talk over you or say you spoke enough. Okay. That's just a message to my audience.
To all of us, you're telling
Animal,
it to all of us.
I really
Yeah,
would pay
he's
to
saying
see
it to
this
all of us.
in a bar venue. You get the idea? The
No,
show being
there's
done
lots
in a
of
bar
people
venue.
that hate me. Just okay. Oh, he's too
That's
tough.
what I'm willing to
No,
pay for it.
I manage the show.
Well,
Okay.
it's very disappointing when you change that way from your sparkling personality.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Rich, the animal reminds you of Mike from Inside Job.
I don't know what that is. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
does
You remember the show
anybody
you said
have
Inside
an
Job
important?
on Netflix?
Okay.
Oh, Inside Job. Yeah.
He's like Mike, that fungus that talks in a very sarcastic way.
Yeah.
Let me ask. Do you have a question for these guys? Since you seem to be going into their business right now, Elly, is there a question? You got a question?
I do not.
No questions. Okay.
I mean, I will offline absolutely entertain. I mean, business development tips, because that's what I'm going to be focused on.
Okay. Well, you giving you the opportunity with the geniuses here. Okay. Gavin, I haven't talked to you for a while. Anything you'd like to say, Gavin? Is there anything that you haven't had a chance?
Add it in.
No, I was just wondering if Ernie's question was answered about, because he said at some stage, how does it then work? All this sourcer, recruiter, blah, blah. How does it work for recruitment agencies? And there wasn't much answered on that. So I'm just wondering if Ernie felt that he had the right answer.
Well, let me tell you what I think, okay? And then maybe I think when they hire somebody and they say they're a sourcer, I've always thought that it was like Dean DaCosta, like going out and whipping out like 1,000 people and then shooting them out to his recruiters that were going to call people. It was like a separate department.
So with regards to recruiting,
But you guys are like busting my bubble. You know what I mean? It's like
David M Marr wants to say something.
So with regards to recruiting and sourcing, I've done both, and I'm currently working more on the sourcing side. And I can tell you that, like what Jim said, sourcing and recruiting is basically the corporate's version of taking the agency model and building it in-house. So there are sourcers that are technically entry level, which you could equate to a junior recruiter if you wanted to. But I would say that recruiters and sourcers are similar but different. Recruiters typically don't have the bandwidth to source deep enough to be able to find the people for those roles that are niche and that people aren't going to apply to the jobs posted. So what my role is typically to focus on positions that are senior subject matter expert level roles through senior directors. And my background is tech, so I focus on tech space. So it's basically finding those people in competitor companies. And part of it is doing research. Part of it is actually engaging with the talent. And then when the candidates are interested, screening them. And then the handoff point between recruiting and sourcing typically is after either I finish screening them or they're set up for the first stage in the interviewing process and they've passed it and then they get handed off.
So do you pass them off to another recruiter or do you pass them off to HR?
I pass them off to my recruiting partner who I work with, and I'm in the intake sessions with the hiring manager, adding a lot more market data. Sometimes it's a matter of doing market intelligence and providing them with what the market landscape looks like.
So aren't you like, why don't you just hire somebody who can do everything?
It basically boils down
There's
to
not enough hours in a day.
Division of labor, just like in the automotive plants.
Yeah, no,
Ernie,
I'm just thinking
you
if
know
if
that.
hire-
Come on.
But if you hire people, you're looking at paying this guy like 100,000 and paying another guy 100,000. You got 200,000 you paid.
Yeah,
Hire
and they're
somebody at 150.
and they're both
Yeah, but
good,
if
and they're
you-
both
but
focused
Ernie,
on different
they'll be-
aspects of the
if you
job.
have-
Yeah.
if you have
They'll be
a-
getting at
I'm
least
just-
$1 million out of the 200K.
I'm
So
just-
have a
ROI is there.
robust recruiting and sourcing function established in-house, you're
This
saving.
is starting to
agency
sound like a
whatever otherwise
regular podcast, and I don't like that. Okay, it's a long, drawn out, verbose conversation about. I could pose these questions more clearly, and I could answer them more clearly. I am going to brag. That's what I do, and I'm going to say something. Jimmy Durbin has been involved with me off and on since 2005 on recruiting.com blogs. It was a popular blog, and I see a direct tradition from back then to right now. Am I right or wrong, Jim? We're still doing the same thing here that we did then. But I thought
I have
it was
a lot more
good.
sympathy for the people
I
we
thought
used
it
to
was
yell
good.
at.
Okay. Ernie, I can't believe Ernie doesn't get it. I believe he does get it. He's just trying to antagonize me or something like that.
No.
The show has improved.
Dummy. Okay.
Well,
The show has
that's
improved
debatable,
significantly
but
since
anyway.
2005 because there's no more singing at the beginning.
There was no show in
Oh, yeah,
2005. That
Well,
started in
Jim, could you
2007.
sing for us, please, Jim?
No, not at all.
We can't
COVID
because
killed my voice.
now they've got the software that if you sing, they kick you off their platform. Okay, because
Nobody's listening to this.
somebody else
Calm
owns
down.
it.
Thank
No,
God for that.
Facebook tells me,
That's true.
Sony owns that song. You can't sing. Mama kicked me. Mama told me to knock you out. You can't. It happened on this show. Okay. CornerstoneSearch.com. Yay! The salesrecruiter.com. Foodindustryrecruiter.com. MarioTheRecruiter.com. Up in heaven today. Everything about
Floating around in peace. Yeah.
.com. Jimmy Durbin, the great one, doesn't have a URL. I don't understand it. Neither, I assume, does Elly. Or have you got a domain name for us today? No?
I will be working on it.
Okay.
Elly with a Y, Cohen, recruiter. You'll find me on LinkedIn.
Eh,
Okay, well,
Let's see.
that's the hard way, okay?
we gotta get a website.
I
don't
love
we?
No,
Elly.
no,
Even
look,
Elly's a tough name. Elly's a tough one because it could be ELLIE, like on the Beverly Hillbillies,
That's why
not
I said Elly with a Y.
ELLY,
You'll
like
find
you've
me.
got. Figure it out. Thanks, everybody.